Medical News Today. medicalnewstoday.com. Now, these websites, just look at this. Look at the layout. This just can't be the final source to base an opinion or to base like a perspective on. Just look at this cheesy ass layout of this website. You just can't call this a reliable source. This is like a blog type of website. It's written by a journalist, but it's reviewed by someone who's credentialed. Oh, okay, all right, we can trust in that, right? Well, let's see how well they reviewed this article. Did they review it well enough to make sure that the citation to a study wasn't just a link to a fucking nutrition label about butter? Look at this. This isn't a study. This just says what butter is. And this is supposed to be about butyrate acid. And they are right, butyrate acid is an essential role in digestive health. But A, we don't need to eat this shit to get it. We produce it endogenously from consumption of resistant starches. Once RS, resistant starch, enters the colon in a form that is accessible to microbial digestion, it is fermented to short-chain fatty acids, such as butyrate. So you get butyrate along with other beneficial short-chain fatty acids, and that is how we get butyrate. We don't need to eat animals that have already done this from their source of resistant starch in order to get butyrate. And that's a common theme you see everywhere with these animal products, is that we need to eat their process, which we share, to get that nutrient. So, why would this one study, how well reviewed can this fucking little blog article be? And right above this butyrate section, that lovely butyrate section with the brilliant study that it mentioned, they've got a 2018 article suggesting that dietary CLA is associated with lower risk of coronary heart disease. It does suggest that. They aren't lying, but they're being incredibly misleading here. This is a good study that they link. This is how you fucking link something. I'm glad that they at least did that. But look at this. Linoleic acid. Not conjugated linoleic acid, which is the CLA that they're touting as being very healthful. This, again, is all about regular linoleic acid. And regular linoleic acid is just absolutely abundant in nuts and seeds in all of the plant kingdom. It's incredibly common. And yes, regular linoleic acid is inversely associated with coronary heart disease risk. That doesn't mean you have to ingest CLA. That wasn't a study about CLA. Right above that lovely claim here, this is why ghee is healthier than butter, because it has less of the problematic milk carbohydrate and less of the problematic milk protein, but there's still the problematic milk fat. Fat, carbs, and protein are the macronutrients which entirely make up the caloric content of the food. I say the only way this could be more healthful is if you eliminated the fat too. And then you just wouldn't be left with any calories from this bullshit. It wouldn't be a food, it wouldn't exist, and then that would be healthy. Because this fat it's just pure saturated fat, and saturated fat makes blood sludgy. You can look it up. One last thing I want to point out about this article, which is the first link that pops up just from Googling the phrase ghee, is its conclusion that it draws, which is very, very funny about this supposed health food. It claims neither ghee nor butter is unhealthful, really. When eaten in moderation, that's the key. Alright, so let's see what this moderation would look like. I've pulled up the nutrition facts on ghee here, clarified butter. Butter oil, it sounds really healthy, doesn't it? Butter oil. 1 single ounce of ghee gives us 17.6 grams of saturated fat. Now, by this website's own standards, 13 grams of saturated fat per day is what they recommend as the limit. It's what they say that the American Heart Association has recommended as a limit. 13 grams a day. So, if this ghee is so healthful, how can eating a single ounce of it be too much to where it starts to become unhealthful? If a food is truly inherently healthy, eating 1 ounce of it isn't too much. Eating 1 ounce of a healthy food doesn't put you into that territory of eating in an unhealthy way. It's absolute nonsense. This is the only other .com article that I'm critiquing here. It seems to have a bit more integrity. It's not littered with ads. It's got a bit more of a serious layout, although they're talking about the nutritional power of egg yolks, so I am skeptical. At least they mention how the cholesterol in ghee becomes oxidized because of the cooking process that's required to clarify the butter to produce it. And their talk about the harmful components is much more reasonable. However, this is so common. You don't need to eat ghee to get these things whatsoever. We produce all the vitamin K2 and butyric acid that we need from our own gut biomes. K2 is produced by intestinal bacteria from vitamin K. And this is all about how resistant starch, RS here, once it enters the colon in a form that is accessible to microbial digestion, it is fermented to short-chain fatty acids, such as butyrate. We produce the butyrate we need from eating resistant starch. It's just a really clearly known thing. It's not really up for debate. We produce the butyrate we need. So that's butyrate and K2. We make plenty of it ourselves. That doesn't mean we have to eat animals that have done the same process themselves and produced it themselves endogenously. We produce it endogenously within ourselves. So there's K2 and butyric acid. CLA, there's nothing that calls for the ingestion of CLA, which is just conjugated linoleic acid, as I already said. We can just get regular linoleic acid from plants, and it's as good, if not, it's less problematic, because I found this really interesting study here. This is, again, .com, but there are these .com websites which publish actual literature, which are an interesting phenomenon. But anyway, I found this across multiple websites that CLA, this is about CLA supplementation, conjugated linoleic acid supplementation, including ruminic acid, which is acid from rumens, which is a ruminant animal, which produces it. Animals like cows, which literally ingest food into one stomach and then regurgitate it and ingest it again into another stomach, because it ferments in that first stomach. So, do you really want that all up in you? And this is a very interesting study that shows that consuming CLA reduces the fat content of human women breast milk. Yeah, right here, sorry. Milk fat content was significantly lower during the CLA treatment as compared to placebo treatment, which was olive oil. So there we've got CLA. It's not essential at all. We can get linoleic acid without complications of women in pregnancy getting less good milk fat to their baby. And that's like the only time in our lives we really want good milk fat, is when mothers are lactating to infants, when our bodies are totally designed to take in milk, the milk of our same species, mind you, during our lactating period of life. Anyway, vitamin A and E, I don't even have to open a fucking tab for this. It should be known. You can just eat carrots. Carrots amongst plenty of other things, green vegetables, just practically every fucking plant has a good amount of vitamin A. And E from just nuts and seeds, like I said, and many other foods too have just plenty of vitamin A and E. If you're eating plants, you don't got to worry at all about that. And vitamin D, finally, your primary source should be from the sun. If you're not getting enough sun exposure, you should supplement with vitamin D. You should not try and get it from your diet to make up for a lack of sun exposure. And there's all sorts of other reasons for that. You want sun exposure for other reasons besides just getting the vitamin D. And most milk is fortified with vitamin D, which is that same argument with B12. The reason B12 is in factory farmed animals at all, which make up for 95% of the animal products on the shelves, the only reason any of that has B12 is because the animals themselves are supplemented with B12. So we're eating, that's like a middleman in a supplemental form of that food. So a lot of the vitamin D from animals is from supplement. Not 100% of it, but a lot of it. And anyone who's not getting adequate sun exposure should be supplementing vitamin D. It does have to do with hormones, and it's important. So there we go. You don't need to eat fucking ghee to get any of those things. And you don't even need CLA, K2, or butyric acid, these last three. D is probably their strongest claim here, but again, just get some goddamn sunlight. You want that for all kinds of reasons, not just vitamin D. You want sunlight. Even if you're eating these vitamin D-rich foods, it's still a good idea to supplement with vitamin D in the winter if you're not getting much sunlight at all. So that's about this website. I mean, just look at that. That's it sitting at room temperature. That's saturated fat. That's what makes it classified as saturated, is that it stays solid like that at room temperature. And you don't want that in your body. And this is a study I pulled up explaining why you don't want to ingest shit that looks like that. I mean, there's plenty of dangers with saturated fat, but this is one that discusses just one danger, which is that it reduces the anti-inflammatory potential of HDL. It impairs arterial endothelial function as well, whereas after consuming polyunsaturated fat, it does not do these things. So you just don't want saturated fat. This is from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. The president of that organization, by the way, from 2015 to 2016, Kim A. Williams, at the time this was written, the president of this college of cardiology decided to go vegan for pretty clear reasons here. And one last point from this medicalnewstoday.com cute little blog article. It is the strongest point to be made in favor of ghee. They're talking about this 2018 study, and yep, they actually know how to cite a study here. It's a study that shows, the beneficial effect of ghee consumption. Now this is funny, they chose fucking mustard oil of all things to compare it to. Mustard oil is banned for consumption in the United States and Europe for being high in an incredibly dangerous fatty acid, erucic acid, ERUCIC acid. It's an omega-9 found in mustard oil, which is very damaging and raises cholesterol a lot, actually. So, for all the things to compare it to, they couldn't compare it to walnuts, You'd see no beneficial effect over walnuts, which is all the good fat you need. But anyway, this is interesting, and it's mainly about the references here. Now this is funny. Their first reference is to an article published in the International Dairy Journal. Now, I wouldn't trust the International Spinach Journal to tell me the benefits of spinach. It's a bit too conflicting of self-interest. Now, this ended up being an interesting read. Their second site here, that ghee significantly increased biliary excretion of cholesterol, which is the way that the body gets rid of cholesterol. Like if someone were to start eating healthier and stopped ingesting cholesterol so that their actual serum cholesterol could start to lower, that cholesterol is excreted typically. So that was very interesting. However, I couldn't find anything that says whether or not this is favorable to significantly increase a biliary excretion of uronic acid or phospholipids. I couldn't find anything saying that that's a good thing. And biliary excretion means just excretion of bile, and excretion relating to bile. So it's redundant that they would say bile acids. But there's probably more to that. That just seems very vague. Uronic acid, I only found good things about that. I'm not sure why you'd want to increase your excretion of it. And phospholipids are very beneficial. They really hold up the structure of cell membranes. I'm not sure that this is necessarily an awful thing to increase biliary excretion of phospholipids. Phospholipids within the body serve a very good function. So if you're increasing your excretion of them, I'm just not sure that's a good thing. But it is definitely a good thing to be excreting cholesterol if you have high cholesterol. However, back to this for a second. If consuming the saturated fat, as ghee is almost entirely saturated fat, if that reduces the anti-inflammatory potential of HDL, and if it impairs arterial endothelial function, if those are side effects to trying to reduce your cholesterol by consuming ghee, then consuming ghee is not the most reasonable way to reduce cholesterol. So to wrap things up here, even if the ghee is a way to reduce cholesterol, we know that there are unhealthy ways to reduce things, such as one's body weight, and that a much more healthful way to reduce your cholesterol is to get all the animal products out of your diet, yes, but you can increase your intake of fiber to reduce cholesterol. You can just Google fiber and cholesterol. Fiber is one of the absolute best ways to reduce your cholesterol, so instead of taking ghee, you could just eat some natural whole plants, whole grains, and healthy fats, lean proteins like beans. Yes, not so much animal products. Vegetables, starchy vegetables, fruit. Those are the good ways to lower your cholesterol. Not this coagulated, nasty, fucking shit that looks like that, Like that's exactly what arterial plaque looks like. You're just better off eating the real foods. And so finally, for that nail in the coffin, I'm going to get into fucking dioxins, which no one talks enough about. And The simple fact of the matter is that they are a class 1 carcinogen. They are like the king environmental pollutant. This is the World Health Organization discussing dioxins. And more than 90% of human exposure to dioxin is through food, mainly meat and dairy products, fish and shellfish. Dairy, especially dairy products. And last time I checked, ghee was dairy. And if you know anything about dioxin, you'll know that it's stored in the fat tissue. Yeah, see, look, even here. Trimming fat from meat and consuming low-fat dairy products decreases the exposure to dioxin compounds. It says may decrease, but it's very well known that dioxin and most toxins in general are just stored in fat cells. So if ghee is clarified butter, meaning it's butter oil, meaning it's like the purified fat from butter, you're keeping all of those dioxins. And if anything, you're concentrating the source of this class 1 carcinogen. Class 1, meaning it's not a suspected carcinogen. It's not loosely correlated to causing cancer. It's proven to cause cancer. And this is a great article. If you just Google dioxins and furans, this is the nail in the fucking coffin here. Look at the vegan diet over here. And these are things you do not want inside of you. These are horrible environmental pollutants, class 1 carcinogens. You'll see that the food that has more of this has more of this. The food that has more dioxins has more of the other PCBs and environmental pollutants and more furans. And look at butter. It's only beaten by freshwater fish, and that's butter. So, you know, like if they had ghee in here, it would be somewhere here. And this shows how the fat density increases, because milk probably takes into account skim milk and all the different percentages of milk. You know, this is just our food supply. And then as the fat gets more concentrated in cheese, the level of the environmental toxins increases. And butter, it skyrockets. So ghee would probably be more up here. So ghee is, yes, concentrating the fat, but also concentrating the toxins, the carcinogens, the class 1 carcinogens. And this is the sad part. Look at human milk compared to milk. And, you know, that's because this milk from cows and maybe goats and whatever else they're taking into account here, they aren't consuming a bunch of freshwater fish. They aren't being fed butter. Humans are being fed freshwater fish and butter and hot dogs, bologna, and all that bologna. So what about the vegan diet human milk? You know, these folks, their human milk would not look like this, because these are taken from a general population which is consuming all of this horrible bullshit. And dioxins are listed as the class 1 carcinogen. Dioxin-like things. These are like all the forms of dioxin, subsumed by the term dioxin. These are the class 1 carcinogens. But look at that. It just happens to be the least toxic. And I want to see this over here. I don't want our milk as a species to be fucking ridiculously polluted because we insist on indulging on this bullshit. This should be what our breast milk looks like.